Do you see police killings of Black Americans today as a form of lynching?
When it's committed the way George Floyd was murdered, yes. I always use the term lynching murders. I wanted to be very clear. When we're talking about Black people are getting killed when we use that term lynching. I think using the term murder right now is very important. I think being clear about the anti-Blackness of it is very important, which is actually to insist on its difference and its specificity, rather, compared to other kinds of racisms that lead to death or other kinds of lethal bodily harm. And I think it's important to develop a nomenclature, a language that is specific to that history so that we can bear witness to it as citizens and all the fullness that it deserves. So you're right to ask the question, is lynching the right term to use when we're talking about the present day continual acts of police abuse, force, murders of Black people? I think we reach towards that language, we reach towards that word, I think because we're wanting to make a historical argument that this kind of brutality that's being directed against African Americans doesn't come out of nowhere. There's a long history to it. And I think using the term lynching now captures that energy, captures that desire and wish, and I think analytic insight that this is a form of violence that has a structural root to it, and we need to attend to it. Lynching may be an imperfect term, but if we carefully unpack it in each instance that we use it, then we can see the fuller kind of history that so many Americans just don't know and need to know in order to make sense of this moment.
Professor Goldsby, I want to ask you about the title of your book. Why do you call lynching a spectacular secret?
I describe lynching as a spectacular secret because, on the one hand, when you read the news accounts, the contemporary accounts of lynchings when they were at their height in the 19th century, it's stunning to go back into those sources and to see how much attention was being paid to anti-Black murders. And that is really quite striking to me, just the plethora, the broadcast scope of these murders that oftentimes happened in southern towns and cities, but were being scaled up and scaled out into spectacles through the news coverage, through the ways in which different media technologies were being used out to the whole country, to the Northeast, to the Midwest, even around the world. But what was striking to me and why the word secret mattered to me was that so few of us know about it. The ways in which we suppressed knowledge of those murders, didn't talk about them openly. What were our investments as a nation in keeping quiet about it? That term secrets get captured for me, and that tension between the visibility on the one hand and producing an invisibility about this practice.
The Black Lives Matter movement is emphasizing, quote, say their names. Why is biography so important?
I think that biography is the way we get to understand all of the actors in those events in their fullest human dimensions, especially the victims, and reminding us of the human person whose life was absolutely, at the end of the day, taken unjustly. How do we lift up the lives that Black people led? That phrase, say their name, say her name, say his name.
Say his name! Trayvon Martin! Say his name! Trayvon Martin!
The deaths of Black people right now justifies our collective readiness to embrace Black culture now. That, I'll be honest, that's worrisome to me. And so by remembering the complexities of Black people in this moment, lifting up their lives, studying their lives with the rigor and the care and the attention they deserve is one way to stave off that type of darker interest, I think.
What's his name? George Floyd! What's his name? George Floyd! What's his name? George Floyd!
Cell phone video in many ways has become the modern equivalent of lynching photography, although the intent of the person taking the video is very different. Are you worried about promoting the same kind of reckless eyeballing with these images?
It's so important to mark that shift in the uses of photography in documenting racial violence, that it really matters that this time around, the cameras are in African Americans' hands. It really matters. You know, the young woman who filmed George Floyd's murder deserves a Pulitzer, and the ways in which using social media to stay ahead of the news media. This is a tremendous, tremendous shift. And I think we've got to figure out a different ethics for how we use that information that has been so courageously recorded and preserved by these young Black activists. How do we responsibly circulate that information so that we understand the full viscerality of what's going on, the real stakes of what's happening in these events? To what uses do we put it? How do we frame it so that people can enter into it and bear witness? Because we have so many more portals to capture this information and to circulate it. I'm really heartened by the courage that I see with young Black activists to step into that fray and to make news, literally, of their own.